better version of itself. If you've watched the Triumph video, then welcome back to Spain. I haven't left. Two vlogs in about 3 days. I'm almost turning into a vlogger here. Anyway, welcome to the Nasser camp. Nasser Al-Attiyah, the Dakar car winner, multiple time Dakar winner. This is his Spanish base. I think that's his house actually. Maybe he's watching me on CCTV right now.
This is like kind of hard enduro. If you feel good, do it.
Yep. We're here to test, have been testing Rieju, however you want to say it. They've just come out with a brand new 300 two-stroke fuel injected engine. It's their own one. It's been in development for a couple of few years by now. Not least employing the expertise of Alfredo Gomez, but also an awful lot of testing by Dominic Oljawi in all kinds of enduro conditions. I think it's fair to say they've put in the hours and put in development time to come up with this new 300 model. There's a 250 model coming, but at the moment they're just concentrating on 300. And yeah, the test, so first test impressions really have been here all day. I say all day, we didn't get started very early and it's been a little bit of a short test to be perfectly honest, but a nice enduro loop. There's a good little bit of hard enduro to test the bikes at, in that kind of low speed conditions. There's some fast stuff, there's some yeah, a mixture of real different terrain. So yeah, we've had a good test of the bike in all kinds of enduro and I would say trail conditions today. So it's been a good test. Not least a good test of the fueling. So that's one thing to say immediately. They've made a big thing in the presentation about it being, they've got 2 injectors, and to the best of my knowledge some of the other fuel injected bikes use both injectors throughout the rev range, whereas Rieju have made a bit of a deal about making sure that we understood that one of their injectors works for the low RPM and the other one works for the higher RPM, and the consequence of that, they say, is that it makes it much more like a carburetor feeling, which is obviously one of the criticisms lots of people have about the fuel injected 2-strokes, is that some of them, particularly ones from Austria, they don't have that carburetor feel, and that it might be a contributing factor to why there's no they haven't had a great deal of success at World Championship level with those bikes, ignoring a couple of notable exceptions, but still the you know, the E3 World Champion has been on a beta for a number of years now. A big change in the there are two other big things to mention. One is the engine now has a counterbalance shaft, so there's less vibration. There's less issues with that kind of old vibey bike, which I think was a bit of a problem with the previous MR300 model. From my point of view, certainly it was. And also the new engine is slightly adjusted in the frame, so slightly lower. And what that has done, that's one of the key elements that Dominic again was talking about, is it's given the bike just a little bit more front bias, and I think for me that's given it an awful lot more feel in the front end of the bike. So that sort of confidence that you need in bad conditions, I think it's that's a key element for me, for sure. Rieju have done a good job of basically making their own engine, so they made a big deal of that as well. It's all made in Spain, designed, R&D'd, developed, and now produced in Spain. Whereas some of their other models in their range, they're famous for their 50cc bikes and their small capacity street bikes, city bikes, all this kind of thing. But their competition range, this is the premier bike, and they made a big deal of that being made in Spain. So, you know, not parts sourced from other parts of the world and all that kind of jazz that seems important to some people. There are two models. There's a standard racing model, and this one behind me is the Pro model. Both bikes have more or less the same equipment as standard, the same Nissin brakes, the same KYB suspension, and the same kind of components, definitely the same chassis and engine, obviously, that kind of thing's all the same. Both bikes have got a diaphragm clutch now, which is nice and light. But the difference on the Pro model is just a few things like renthal bars, renthal grips, handguards are standard, there's fan, there's coating on the forks to reduce the stiction a little bit, and you've got 3 different options of mapping, so you can have it on full power mode, there's a softer second mode, and then an even softer steel map, which they call the wet map. Is in 1 at the moment, or? 3. Okay, I'll try in 3, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah? I had that one in 1, and I liked it, yeah?
The engine is the same, I think.
Yeah.
Calculation, you know?
I'll press the wrong bit. I've used all of them. I especially tried the second and third maps in the hard enduro section, and I settled on the second map, to be honest, which was the one that wasn't quite so fierce. It still gave you the blip of throttle response that you need. So there was one place where I was lugging at low revs, and then I suddenly needed the power to get up a rock, get over a root, and that's still there in the second map. And I think that's where you can tell that there is definitely a different feeling to having those 2 injectors. So thumbs up from that. All the way through the riding I've done today, there's been no glitching in the throttle fuel delivery. So I found no problems with the fuel response, the throttle response and the fueling of the bikes. Haven't found any of that. It's still premixed. They feel like it's a big debatable issue. Lots of people think, lots of people, maybe dual sport riders and trail riders, love the idea of having separate oil and fuel, but Rieju are definitely clear that at the moment anyway, that they prefer the sort of more racing option. You still have to pre-mix your fuel because of not having all the mechanical things inside, as Dominic Aljawi said in the presentation. It's just extra things to go wrong. So if you remove that, you're just feeding pre-mixed fuel into the engine, then you've got a little bit less weight, a little bit less complicated mechanical elements in the mix on the bike. You're on this hard pack terrain, it's very dry, very dusty, and they've sent it out on pretty hard tyres, really, not with mousses in, so it's been pretty difficult to feel the grip sometimes today, and that's held back. It doesn't help you push as much as you perhaps want to, because I wasn't confident in the grip in the tyres. said that, the suspension, the KYOB suspension is, although I felt it was really soft and springy on the racing, the more standard model, I think it was just a setup thing. I think it just needed changing and making it more firm, because even when you start to push it and try a bit harder, there's still that dependable bottom to the fork. So when I braked hard, when I was coming in there were some of the corners on the trail where the track just kind of basically ran off the edge of a cliff. So you're braking hard and thinking, oh, what's going on here, what am I going to do? You've still got that feel there at the bottom of the fork stroke to actually trust the front, turn in and go with it. So that's one positive, definitely. What else? I don't know what else to tell you. I don't think there's anything else that stood out, particularly because everything else is kind of familiar. If you've had one of these bikes before, if you had a, you know, if you're familiar with steel backbone frame 300 two-stroke, it's all there. It's all the very familiar elements to it, and everything works. Everything's ready to go. Everything's set. You know, the brakes, the suspension, the handlebar position, the footrest position, all that kind of stuff is very familiar to anyone who rides these kinds of bikes. But it's just a better version of itself. I think that's probably the best thing I can say. Rieju have made a better version of a bike that I think most people would think, still criticise them for being the old GasGas platform, which was solid but an old bike. To all intents and purposes, a decade or more old bike. This now feels like their own bike, and I think they deserve the credit for coming up with, especially in the modern age where I think there's more and more of a problem with manufacturers of motorcycles making two-stroke blue smoke motorbikes. They've put in the time and effort, and they've invested in enduro and off-road. Don't forget that factor. There are a lot of other manufacturers out there who go and make motocross bikes and then start thinking about enduro afterwards. Rieju have definitely put us in the enduro world at the forefront of their sort of performance motorcycle models. So credit to them for that. But apart from that, over and out. Read more on Enduro 21, and yeah, check out the other videos, but definitely stay tuned to enduro21.com. Cheers. Wish I had a beer. Got any mooses in your back pocket, Andy? Bloody hell, sketchy, isn't it?
That's what we said. I just think it's a bit